In this video, we're going to create the arms and the legs for our cartoon can. We'll first begin by going over how the can was bent and shaped the way it is. We're going to be using deform nonlinear, so I'll hold down my space bar, I'll go to deform, nonlinear, and I'll choose bend, and I'll hit 4 on the keyboard, and you'll see a white line inside the geometry. If I would hit T on the keyboard now, I can see 3 blue diamond shapes. If I grab the one in the middle and pull on it, it'll bend the geometry for me. So you can see that by the degree of bending it, you can change the angle of it with the rotation tool for the direction you may want. I can isolate part of it to the bottom or top also by hitting T on the keyboard, and then if I drag one of these diamond shapes on either end towards the center, it will reduce the bend. And that's how pretty much this was accomplished. After I had the bend, I selected it, I deleted the history, and I wanted to flare more at the top than the bottom. That also was going to deform, nonlinear, and I used flare. And you'll see the circular shape up at the top here, and that will let you kind of bend and distort just one end of it. And you have the bottom where you can click on that and you can reduce it if you want. So each time you introduce one of these nonlinear deformities, you have to delete the history. It's always a good idea to duplicate this. So if I would hit Command D during the process and move it, that's a permanent effect that was left by this one as well as the one previous. So I could go back in here now, and if I wanted to, I could select that tool and re-edit it, and you can see now this one is independent. We're going to put arms and legs on our Coke can here, and we're going to be using our extrude tool, and we'll be using the insert edge loop tool for it. I'll go to one of my orthographic views, and I'll introduce a polygon cube that will kind of serve as a thigh for this guy. So I'll click and drag, I'll draw a shape, something like that, and then I'll go and give it some thickness. In my perspective view, I'll click and select face, I'll select the front face, and I'll click on my extrude tool. Now you might find it easier to go into an orthographic view at this point, and I'll zoom in, I'll pull out that new with the added polygon group, and I'll start to bend it down where the knee might be. All the tools are included in the extrude tool, so you don't have to hit the keys associated with these transforms on the keypad itself. I'll hit G on the keyboard one more time, and then I'll pull that straight down. And I did that by clicking back on this blue dial. I'll let you go back and forth from 2 different orientations. So I'm going to stop about here because I want to start introducing a foot as well. I'll go to my perspective view, and in my perspective view I'm going to hit G to start adding another polygon group. I'll select one of the scale tools, and then I'll grab the one in the middle, the light blue one, and I'll pull it out, and I'll just pull it down a little bit to make the top of the boot. Hitting G again, I'll pull down another section. It gets pretty subjective now. We're just thinking cartoon, kind of a Mickey Mouse sort of a thing here. I'll hit G one more time, and I'll pull it down a bit and start to pull it in. And hitting G again, I'll drag down, and now I'll put this down towards where it would be on the ground. And I could have gone to my orthographic view if I chose. And now I'm going to start introducing a insert edge loop tool. I'll click on the insert edge loop tool, and maybe I'll click about here. I'll hit W on the keyboard, and I'm going to select the face in the front, and I'll click on my extrude tool, and I'll pull that up, start to scale it, pull it down a bit. I'll start to widen it a bit. As I'm doing this, I might go back and forth from 1 and 3 on the keyboard to see exactly what I have, and you'll see there'll be a need afterwards to kind of firm up some of these points. I'd like the geometry to be a little bit sharper. So I've gone in and added some edges to my geometry to firm things up and customize it a little bit more, so you can tweak this as you wish. One thing you might want to note is you want to put an edge very close to the base so that the shoe appears to be flat on the bottom. I could have gone in and extruded here for heels if I wanted, but I'm going to leave it more like a sneaker. All right, so the next thing we would need to do is to set up the UV map, and it's going to be very simple because the leg will be a kind of a black, like a cartoon character, and the shoe will be a solid color, with the exception of maybe some reference to laces in this area in the front. So I'll start by deleting the history and freezing the transform, and with it selected, I'll go to UVs and automatic. So in the UV editor, we'll see something like this. I'm going to put automatic on just the shoe as well, and it'll make it a little easier to kind of put the texture where we would like it to be. Before I do, though, I'll go to UV shells. Inside the UV editor, I'll select them all, and then I'm just going to move it outside of that corner piece there, so that when we apply the new automatic to the shoe itself, we can easily manipulate the pieces or the UV shells here. So I'll return to my object mode, and I'll go to my orthographic view where I can see the shoe, and I'll right click and I'll choose face, and I'll start to select the faces I want for the shoe. Now if I select just some of them at the bottom, I can hold the shift, and if I hit the period on the keyboard, I can gather in the other rows that might comprise it. Now I'll go to UV and I'll click on automatic again, and I'll return to my object mode, select the geometry, and then access the UV editor. And you can see now this is what the shoe is comprised of. So what we need to do is I'm going to right click, I'll choose UV shell, and I'll select all of these. I'll move these out a bit. And I'm only interested in finding out what the top of the shoe is, where we're only going to use reference for laces. The rest will be a solid color. So I'll return to my viewport for a minute. And in my perspective view, I'll right click and I'll choose face, and I'll just select the faces on the front here. And now if I go to my UV editor, it'll show me where the top of the shoe is. So I can see it's these pieces right in here. I'll right click, choose UV shell, I'll select these, and I'll pull them out like that. And then if I want to, I could right click, select this one. And what I'll do is I'll put this over here, and I'm going to go to rotate, and I'll rotate it to line it up somewhat, and that should be good enough. So this is the area right in here, with the exception of this little piece where I might put a reference to laces of some kind. So the rest of this is going to be a solid color, so I'm going to take a moment now and just stack these on top of each other. And now I'll just go and get pieces that comprise the leg. And they're going to be all one solid color as well. So I'll stack those. I'll put them right here because we have to put the arm on here as well. And we're going to do much the same thing with the arm. We'll do much the same way we use the leg by introducing a polygon cube, roughly the same thickness. I'll start with a vertical part for perhaps the upper arm. And then I'll right click and choose face. I'll select that face, and I'll begin to introduce some extra polygons here. We'll make the hand pretty much the way we made the foot. Right clicking on the last polygon face. I'll introduce a polygon. I'll move it out a little bit and start to scale it so it's wider. I'll hit G on the keyboard to click on the extrude tool again. And I'm doing the same thing that I did with the foot down here, keeping it stylistically consistent. I'll hit G, pull that one in, start to taper it. And with this one, I'm going to make it not quite as wide because I want to put the hand in now with a certain kind of a position. So now I'm ready to hit G on the keyboard. Now I'll start to add the geometry I want for the hand. And I'm going to add some very general pieces here because I can always come back and customize it a little bit more with the edge loop tool. I'm going to apply a bit of a bend here where it might be holding on to a bottle, because we'll be putting some sort of an asset in the hand of this guy. So I'll start by doing something like that immediately, and I'll just kind of taper it, hitting 3 on the keyboard so I can kind of see what I have here. I'll hit 1. And once I've started to do that, I might go in here before I put any more edges in, and perhaps I would go now, and I think I'm going to just kind of scale this a little bit to make it a little wider, and I'll pull it down on the bottom a bit. So now if I was to hit 3 on the keyboard, I can see I'm starting to get more of a flat hand kind of a shape. Hitting 1 on the keyboard now, I'm going to go to the inside here. I'll drop an edge just on the inside, somewhere in that area. Because if I hit W now and I right click and choose face, I can extrude a surface there. So I'll click on my extrude button. I'll pull it out a little bit. This is where we'll be making the thumb from, this surface here. I'm going to taper it down at the bottom before I model the top thumb part by grabbing those vertexes and just tightening it up towards the bottom. So if I was to hit 3 on the keyboard now, you can see we're starting to get more of what a thumb would look like, and now it tapers towards the middle of the hand. Hitting 1 on the keyboard, I'll go to the top here, I'll right click, choose face, and I'll just extrude a face or 2 here. That'll give me the length I'm looking for. Perhaps it'll be in this direction a bit. I'll rotate it a bit. And I think maybe I'll give it a bit of a taper. I'll hit 3 on the keyboard, and now I can see I have pretty much a thumb shape that I want. The texture of the hand, we don't have to make too big a deal out of this. We could use planar mapping on this because the hand is not going to have any kind of design on it. It's just going to be a solid color. So I'll locate the planar axis I want to put on. For me, it's going to be the X, which is perpendicular to that surface. So we've frozen the transform, delete the history. Now I'll go to UVs, planar. I'm going to set it for X, and I'll hit apply. And then I'll change my projection width and height to a number. Maybe I'll make it 6 for now, as long as it's even. And I'll return to my object mode, and I'll go to my UV editor. So now we can see the shape of the hand here. So it's going to be pretty easy to texture the hand. I'll choose UV shell. I'll select it. I'll hit W. I'm just going to put it over here for now. I'll go to my object mode in my viewport, and I'll select both the arm and the leg. Okay, so now I'm going to put both of these into this corner. I'll right click and choose UV shell. I'll grab the contents of the leg and I'll put this over here. And then I'll select the arm and I'll move that into the corner as well. And I'll go to modify and I'll choose rotate. And you'll see that if you click on rotate, you can put it here. If I was to hit G on the keyboard, I can just kind of keep doing this until I get an orientation that might optimize my UV map a little bit better. I'll return to the object mode for both of these pieces, shift select them, and now I can go to image, UV snapshot, making sure that it's a PNG. I've got the size for 1024 by 1024, making sure the edge is color, and then I'll just browse, put it in my project folder, and then I can go into Photoshop and do the texturing. And I'll click on apply and close.